Well, good morning, everybody, and thanks for taking the time to tune in on our Facebook Live program here today. We're all trying to keep people informed during this pandemic, and one way that I'm doing that is through Facebook Live conversations, to talk about the issues of the day and to explain what's going on right now. And today I am thrilled to be with our Massachusetts Attorney General, Maura Healey. I want to thank her for taking the time to join us. We are grateful. I think everybody knows your background, but let me just review a few things for those few who don't. You've been the Attorney General since 2015. You have taken a leading role, thank goodness, in taking on the Trump administration and holding them accountable for their regulatory rollbacks that threaten the health and safety of our fellow citizens in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. You have expanded outreach and accessibility at the AG's office, making sure that that you are really the people's law firm, and we are grateful for that. And you are on top of all the issues that my constituents talk to me about, whether it's clean air and water, to consumer rights, to workplace protection. And in my opinion, you're one of the best, if not the best, Attorney General in the country. And so I'm thrilled to be with you today. And let me just begin by asking you, how are you doing? How's your family doing? How's your team doing?
Well, I just got to say, Congressman, it's a real treat for me to get to see you and to speak with you. You're such a hero of mine, and you've been such a great mentor, friend, support for so long. And I so admire the work that you do and the fights that you wage. You've got an incredibly important role right now in this time. All your work on the committees, and I know we'll talk about that, but it warms my heart to see you, if only virtually. I'm doing all right. We went virtual actually a week before the state went virtual, and I am so proud of my team, Jim. They are like cranking out the work. It's difficult. A lot of them have kids at home, and managing that homeschooling and working is difficult, but I'm really proud of the team. My family's well, thank you. I miss hugging my little nieces and nephews. Dearly. I've been able to see family members, especially my mom, from a distance, but we all live kind of locally. So it's been nice to at least be able to visit while distance. I just have to say it's been a surreal time, I think, for all of us in government. I formed a COVID team right away in the office, and they've been working on everything from stopping debt collection and utility shutoffs, fighting evictions and foreclosures, a lot of work with the healthcare industry, getting telehealth licensing in place, PPE, trying to support our frontline workers, a lot of focus there. So it's been quite a time. I don't miss not putting on makeup every day, and I haven't had heels on for a long time. So at some point I'll have to adjust to that, but I'm doing all right. Thank you.
I'm glad. Well, it is a strange time, and I'm blessed too with an incredible team here in Washington and in Massachusetts. Most of my people are obviously operating remotely, but still doing all the work and taking all the calls and doing everything from casework to policy work. And I have the same issues with regard to the family that you do. I mean, my dad sadly passed away in November, so my mother's, alone. And I drive up I go to her driveway and we talk. She's in the doorway and I'm in the driveway. We talk. She can't quite understand why I won't come in. It's nothing personal. I just want to make sure you're safe. And she, makes me dinners to go and leaves them outside the door. So we're all very, very, but she's doing okay. So on that front, we're all blessed. Let me. I think a lot of people are focused on what's right now in the news, and that is the whole situation with regard to George Floyd. I've watched the video of the arrest in Minneapolis, and it's not only deeply upsetting, it's sickening. And I think what's even more upsetting is this pattern of violence toward Black and brown men in particular, and women as well. We've been through this so many times. George Floyd's last words were, "I can't breathe." Those were the same words of Eric Garner back in 2014. And, not only do these unwarranted and just horrific killings of Black men keep happening, they too often go unpunished. I hope we get justice in George Floyd's killing. But I think we need more than justice. I mean, we need accountability. We need systematic change to stop this from happening. What's frustrating to me is, again, we've seen this happen time and time again, and we express our outrage, and then we kind of move on, and the same, system stays in place. And I don't know why there haven't been arrests made. I mean, I've seen the video. I wonder what would have happened here if somebody didn't take a video. You're our Attorney General. I mean, I think people would. I'm curious, and I think others would like to hear your reaction. I know you've been in contact with Minnesota's Attorney General Keith Ellison, my former colleague here in Congress. But what's your view on all this?
I was numb, to be honest. And I knew I wanted to say something to my team. It took me a whole day to figure out what I wanted to say, to be honest, because this is so profoundly sickening and upsetting. Look, those officers, they should be charged with murder. They should be charged with murder now. And, I wish that had happened a few days ago, because maybe that would have quelled some of the what we're seeing play out right now in Minneapolis. But that should have happened. This was a murder. This was a killing. And it comes on the heels of just latest incidents, right? Whether it's Ahmaud Arbery, who's just exercising, jogging, or Breonna Taylor, who's at home in her bed sleeping. Charles Cooper out in Central Park, birding, watching birds, literally, and I think it just speaks to what we've known is here, but I think for far long, sort of right beneath the surface, and something about, and I know what it's about, the last 3 years and the license that the White House occupant has given to this sort of behavior. See his really unhelpful tweet this morning encouraging shooting, essentially, of people who exercise their First Amendment rights. Unfortunately, that's what we're seeing. And we've got to call it out here. We've got to demand that there's an end to complicity. Part of what sickened me so much the other day is watching as that man need George's neck to the ground. You saw the life draining out from his body, and there are people standing by, officers standing by. That kind of complicit behavior, needs to be called out, and there needs to be accountability and charges there as well. It does speak to, decades, centuries of systemic racism, and, it's resulting, how that plays out. I mean, just think of this, Jim, right? We're in this pandemic where Black and brown communities have been disproportionately devastated here in Massachusetts, but across this country, right? And they're also disproportionately among the lower wage workers who are the essential workers right now, the PCAs, driving the buses, driving the tea, cleaning the hospitals, and working in the grocery stores. We see the disparity. It's so real. And I think our charge is to do everything we can to attack racism in all its forms and to fight like hell for equality and justice. That's what my office is going to do. I know you do it every day, but this is certainly the time. And I'm nervous right now. I talked to Keith Ellison this morning. I talked to folks here, chiefs last night, and I just, my heart goes out. My heart goes out to people of color right now. We had an office hour-long open discussion just yesterday. We had 2/3 of the office participate, where people just shared, what it was like. A prosecutor in my office, one of the leading deputy chief of our criminal bureau, talking about how, as a Black boy growing up, his experiences. He's deputy chief of my criminal bureau, our criminal bureau in the office. Before he's 18 years old, pulled over by the police 25 times, right? So we've got to talk about this stuff. We've got to engage, and we got to take it on.
I agree. There's the great Pulitzer Prize winning journalist Eugene Robinson, who we see him on TV all the time as well, but he writes a column for the Washington Post. His column today is "Black Lives Are Expendable," and he talks about the fact that the rage that he is feeling is so great. Not only in terms of what happened to George Floyd, but the other cases that you've mentioned just in this month. But and that's just the tip of the iceberg. But he says, I can write and vent my frustrations. I'm on TV all the time, and I can try to shape policy that way. But for the vast majority of African American men and women in this country, who don't have that ability to influence as many people as he does, given his role as a writer and a commentator, he says that rage is even greater. That's why people are taking to the streets, and it's it really is quite sad. You mentioned one of the things you talked about was how this pandemic has really highlighted the inequalities and the inequities in our country, in our systems, and I couldn't agree more. I have a lot of people say, I want to get back to normal. When will we get back to normal? I'm like, I don't want to get back to normal because normal wasn't good enough. We need to do better than normal. I do a lot of work on hunger and food insecurity issues. Before this pandemic, we had 40 million people in this country, 40 million who are food insecure or hungry. I don't want to go back to when 40 million was okay, right? I mean, now the number has gone through the roof. We've seen the lines. You talked about the how this virus has disproportionately impacted communities of color in particular. I read your recent report about environmental injustice and the factors that are causing COVID-19 to disproportionately impact communities of color. Can you explain why it is that our most vulnerable communities are breathing the most polluted air, and how it's impacting Massachusetts during this pandemic?
Yeah, thank you. My office recently put out a brief last week where we basically mapped air quality, air pollution rates in communities with rates of COVID infection. And not surprisingly, you see that in low-income communities, Black and brown communities, immigrant communities with worse air pollution, you see worse public health, right? Health outcomes and greater incidence of coronavirus in this case. I think there are a bunch of reasons for that. Some of it goes back to the institutionalized racism. Some of it goes back to the marginalization of these communities, where it's become, over time, very easy to plop down factories, to cite dirty, polluting, facilities. You look at Chelsea, right, which has higher coronavirus rates than I think just about any borough of New York. And you look at what's there, all the jet fuel, right? For Logan, we've got, the power plant, we've got so many facilities that are emitting, a lot of bad stuff. And, part of it is economic, right? And not having the capacity or wherewithal to have the lawyers and fight the fights that you see some of these more affluent communities wage. And some of it is absolutely racism and indifference. It goes back to your comment about whose lives do we value?
Right.
We're 7 people shot in Dorchester, 5 or 7 the other night. Have we talked about that? Is that on anyone's screen? Clearly that officer, and I don't even want to call him an officer because it degrades and devalues, the true terrific police officers, who are there doing their job. But boy, he clearly did not, simply put, he did not value George Floyd's life.
Right. No, and and you're right. I mean, a lot of the more affluent communities, have the financial resources to hire the best lawyers, to hire the best lobbyists. I mean, to basically fight, anything that might come into their community that they don't want in their community. And so, but we need to figure out a way, to even the playing field here. I've been thinking a lot, like you have, on, the aftermath of these recent deaths, about like, how do we do things differently? I mean, how do we empower the voices of those who have historically had not much of a voice in our legislatures or in our Congress. And how do we demand justice? Not only in the case of George Floyd, but so many other cases. And again, as your report points out, I mean, the disproportionate negative impact is not just in terms of where we see excessive police force, but we're seeing polluters actually
Right.
located in neighborhoods that are mostly communities of color.
Yeah, I think it's got to be intentional. And I'll tell you, you and I both really support candidates of color, for example, getting into races. We know that that sort of representation matters because seeing is believing, and better policies will be made and for far too long, people have been underrepresented in Congress, in state houses, in boardrooms and the like. But I think this is incumbent upon white people, frankly, and white people need to accept and buy into and embrace that equity needs to be part of every single calculation, where things get cited, how healthcare gets delivered, how we determine, housing and access to education. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's got to be a super intentional engagement by white people.
I think you're absolutely right.
To make this happen across like all realms. It's got to like be baked into every policy decision. Some of it is under federal law, like, right, bus lines, where they go, they're supposed to account for equity, but we need that like across all realms, I think.
I agree with you. In the last election, when the Democrats won control of the House, we elected the most diverse freshman class in the history of Congress. We had Ayanna Pressley as part of that class, among other really wonderful new stars in our Congress, and but the people who work up here, still all kind of look like me or you, right? I mean, and so when I became chairman of the Rules Committee, we made permanent a special office on diversity to help make sure that the people who work up here actually look like our country, because one of the things, and I think this is a fair criticism of even liberals and progressives sometimes, is that we like to say we're for a more diverse workforce, and we say it, but sometimes we always don't do it. And what I wanted to do by establishing this office permanently is to kind of remove that excuse, so people can't say, well, I would have hired a more diverse staff, but nobody applied, right? Well, we remove that excuse. You now have a place to go to be able to find the best and the brightest in this country. And so, but you are right. We have to intentionally change the way we approach some of these issues, because it's no longer enough to express our outrage. I mean, and we also, and I think we all have to make a more concerted effort to be present in the communities that are most adversely affected. I know you are. I try to be as much as I can, but we just have to do a better job, and we have to lift up these voices, so that they're being heard in a real way.
Well, that's why I love you so much. I mean, I see you out there at the pantries, right? I mean, people, I think a few things. First, I really commend you on establishing permanently that office, so that there is, that signals something about intention, and that this is going to be something that we account for and look at. I think that's so important. I think your point about we're not going back to normal. This should be an opportunity for us to build in new ways, that build out in ways that rid us of disparity, that address systemic racism, that address issues of poverty and the like. This is the time, right, to make that happen. So I'm hopeful about that opportunity. And I really love your point about act locally, because you can, while it's important, the work and the advocacy against the president and the terrible things he's doing, look around you in your community and see what you can do today to make a difference. I think that's a great point. And I know we're going to talk about your work too.
Well, well, let me just ask you one other question before we get to
sure.
Because the country's beginning to reopen. the governor has put forward a proposal for the reopening of Massachusetts. One of the things that I've been reminding everybody is, yeah, we have an economic crisis that is very, very serious right now, but you cannot solve that economic crisis until you deal effectively with the health crisis. They're interlinked. There's no shortcuts here. So, as we reopen, we have to follow the best medical advice. Our employers have to be, especially vigilant about worker protections and worker safety. Otherwise, we're going to see a surge, and we'll be shutting down again. So as we reopen, obviously the first thing on everybody's mind is safety. So
Yeah.
what should workers do if they feel they're being pressured into an unsafe condition? Should they be worried about getting fired or losing unemployment benefits if they refuse to work in an unsafe situation?
So great questions. I mean, I think that it is important to reopen in a careful way. But as we do that, the health and safety of our workers has to be top priority. So what we did is we have a fair labor hotline. It's been open from the beginning, and it's taking in complaints about workplace safety. You may have seen that we went after Amazon and Whole
Right.
Foods because we were concerned about the workplace safety conditions in the distribution centers and in the grocery stores. They've since responded. I've banded together with other AGs to really speak out on this issue. I want people to know, call my office. You can go on our website, and there's a whole FAQ there for employees, for workers, so that they know their rights. But nobody, first off, if you're sick, you shouldn't be going to work, right? We don't need this spreading. And you can't be fired, under the CARES Act now, under the original act, that people are entitled to 14 days of paid leave. Many employers have gone beyond that. Call my office. We've acted on threats of retaliation and also on firings, and I will make sure that workers are protected. So you can call my office, visit our website. But this is going to be something that my team, Jim, is going to be very, very focused on as we reopen. We have to be, because you put workers at risk,
Right.
you put the public at risk too.
Right. Yeah, no. I'll let you ask a question now.
All right. Well, this is, you mentioned your incredible work. Well, you didn't describe it as incredible, but all of us know it's incredible, the work that you've been doing on the Rules Committee. This COVID crisis in particular, in addition to the work that you've been doing there, the House recently passed your bill, which was to create a subcommittee with subpoena power to conduct oversight of the coronavirus relief funding that's going out the door. There's a lot of money. Talk a little bit about why you thought it was important to introduce that legislation, and what do you think the subcommittee is going to be looking at?
So, actually, it's modeled after a similar committee that then Senator Harry Truman chaired during World War II. To basically make sure that all the money that was being appropriated for that war effort was actually going to help win the war. Because the concern was that, you appropriate money, but sometimes, it goes to people who have connections and may not necessarily be helpful to achieving the goal that money was originally intended for. So he wanted accountability. He wanted to make sure that every cent was being spent appropriately. Now, here we are today. I mean, Congress has appropriated trillions of dollars, and, to help small businesses, to help, families and individuals get through this crisis, to help our states and our cities and our towns. And we want to make sure that it's going to where it's supposed to go to, that it's not being funneled off, to help some special interest or some friend of the president's or some friend of, Jared Kushner's. We want to make sure that it's going to where it's supposed to go. And so, that was the purpose of it. Congressman Jim Clyburn of South Carolina is the chair of this committee, and he will do an excellent job. But Congress needs to do part of our constitutional responsibility is oversight, and we're in a very polarized time, and so some people say, well, how do you know all the money's going to where it's supposed to go to? Well, we're going to have this committee oversee it. Then people say, oh, you just want the committee to embarrass the White House. No, I mean, this is part of our job. We need to do this, and I hope that when this committee does oversight, that everything that they find is that all the money has been dispersed the way we intended it to. But if not, the money we're talking about is taxpayer money. We need to make sure it's being spent in a way that will help people, that will help get us through this crisis.
I couldn't agree more, and I am grateful to you for establishing that committee. I mean, yeah, the amount of money that is going out the door, that needs to go out the door. People desperately need it. Small businesses need it. Our hospitals here in Massachusetts are losing big money every month. It's incredible. So I think that funding is really important, and I thank you for your advocacy on that. But I thank you for the oversight, because I think it's absolutely, I think, been the case that this is an administration that plays favorites. I haven't liked some of what I've seen, the way, for example, in a different realm, the president, targeting PPE to certain states, denying, literally taking from Massachusetts PPE in certain instances. So I think that's so important. It is taxpayer money. And it's how can anyone quarrel with an audit and a look at that? I know they do.
They do,
but
right?
Honestly, this is much where the money goes.
The Republicans on that committee, so they can ask, ask questions as well. But look, I mean, we need to get this right, and I'm sad, that we don't have the leadership, in the White House to get us through this the way I think all of us would expect any president, Democrat or Republican, to conduct themselves. So that the burden has fallen mostly on states and on local communities, and it really is the challenge before us is great.
Yep.
And we got to do this right. We have to reopen in the right way. Otherwise, we're going to shut down again. And so the job that we all have to figure out is how do we deal with the emergency, and then how do we help jumpstart the economy once we're out of this. One of the other things we did in Congress was we adjusted our rules to allow some people who can't get here to operate remotely. And I know the legislature is doing that in Massachusetts, one of the oldest legislatures in the country. And yet here in Congress, you think the world has come to an end because we're trying to make it easier for us to operate and to do oversight and that kind of stuff. We've gotten some pushback from some of our dear friends on the right wing. But the bottom line is, if you want to be here, you can be here. But if you're from California and you're in a hot spot and it's not safe for you to come, or if it is, or your flight is canceled, because flights have been severely cut back, you should still be able to represent your constituents. I had one of my Republican critics on this say, well, you're just worried about the safety of members of Congress. I'm not worried about the safety of members of Congress. There's that great philosopher, Billy Joel, who had that great line that said, only the good die young. So I'm not worried about members of Congress. I'm worried about their staffs. I'm worried about the Capitol Police, the people who keep this and maintain this campus here. And any one of us could be a carrier with, without symptoms. So, we're telling everybody to follow the best medical advice. We should do that as well and conduct ourselves appropriately. But because of that change, we can now do hearings remotely, oversight remotely, or in a hybrid way. And those who can't make it here, can still work, but work from a different location.
I think that's great. And, one of the areas I know you've been working on, and it's something that I've heard a lot about and spoken out some about, is small businesses, right. And the funding, the PPP program, right? Well-intentioned, but, some of it going to publicly traded companies, some of it going, not to so many of the minority-owned businesses or truly small businesses that you and I know, 20 or fewer employees. What have been some of the fixes, and what are you looking to do there?
Yeah, so we passed the HEROES Act, which I'm hoping Mitch McConnell will get around to taking up sometime in the very near future. But helps channel some of that money to small businesses, minority-owned businesses, veteran-owned businesses, women-owned businesses, to mission lenders. So because not just the huge banks. But institutions that have a history of working with the mom and pop type stores. So that's there. In the HEROES Act too, is a lot more direct assistance to states and local governments. And so the states would have maximum flexibility of how to use that money, and so would cities and towns. So if they wanted, like, some of the CDBG money that was in the CARES Act that went to the city of Worcester, it went for a variety of things, including helping some small businesses that don't have the wherewithal to go through this application process and, don't have a big, long-standing relationship with some of our financial institutions. So we're trying to work on making it more responsive to those that are especially in need. Look, luxury steakhouse chains can get through this, and they have long-standing relationships with financial institutions. They can, but it's those mom and pop businesses and the restaurants. We're trying to provide added flexibility, because when a restaurant reopens, it's going to, they can't just open up to the way they were. It's going to have to be in stages. And so they're going to have a more difficult time, being able to get back to where they were. So we needed the flexibility in terms of, some of the requirements of the PPP program. So there's some changes being made, and again, there's going to have to be additional tweaks. And again, if we want to, once we get through this, we also have to start thinking of the future. And we need a major transportation and infrastructure bill to rebuild our country, put people back to work. I mean, we have to understand, that this is a crisis like no other that we have ever lived through. And, I think of, like, what did Franklin Roosevelt do, during the Great Depression?
Exactly.
He didn't nickel and dime, every little thing. And he thought big, out of the box. And you had the New Deal, right? And that helped get this country through that. We are in a similar moment right now where we have to think, big, and we have to think in ways to, again, not to go back to normal, but to even be better than normal. So
I totally hear you, and I'm with you on that. And there's a lot of work in the immediate. I know my office, we're going to continue to be out there. We were in Worcester. We've been in Worcester quite a bit, working with the African Bridge Network and others, targeting resources. So important that we all get out multilingual resources to vulnerable communities right now. We're going to continue to enforce our debt collection and price gouging laws here. But I think the long game, I've got a few nursing home investigations underway, because so tragic.
Yeah.
So we're going to keep doing that work. But I totally agree with you about the long game and seizing this opportunity to bring about the kind of institutional transformative change, in concrete ways that will benefit, residents of the Commonwealth, but the entire country.
Right. But let me just thank you for the efforts of your office in terms of providing information in a multilingual fashion. I mean, we represent a very diverse community, and information right now is particularly important, and not just in terms of how we reopen, but in terms of what people's rights are. So it is.
There was a great story about that too. I got a call from Eric Dixon, who is the head of UMass Memorial, of course, in Worcester, and he was concerned because people weren't showing up for healthcare, for regular healthcare, and that's understandable because they're afraid they were going to catch the coronavirus. And then he noticed that within the African community, there were problems about trying to find places, both food insecurity and also housing insecurity. Where could people go to quarantine or self-isolate? And I know we worked with your office on this in the city of Worcester, UMass Memorial, to help get out information, actually connecting with hotels and the like. But it was really terrific to see that sort of coordination happen quickly. And an example, I think, of the collective efforts that we're all engaged in right now to specifically target and help immigrant and low-income communities and Black and Brown communities that have been hit hardest by this public health crisis.
Right, and we have encountered a number of people who are just afraid to come forward at all because of the rhetoric coming out of the White House. And these are people who are here legally, but just concerned because of some of the harsh rhetoric coming out of the White House that somehow that they're ineligible to be able to, get the care at an emergency room, or they're able, or they don't qualify, to be able to, get anything, quite frankly, that might help protect them and their families. And it is frustrating, but it's, but we have to get the word out there that, this virus, knows no borders, right? This virus, impacts, everybody. I mean, if it is potentially deadly, to people of all backgrounds. So we have to be all in this together, in order to get out of it. And I think, that's one of my frustrations about the president is that, and this is a terrible thing to say. I mean, look, I disagree with him on almost everything, and I've said this many times. I don't think he's fit for the office, but I am not here to cheer him. I'm not here to cheer for him to fail, because every time he fails, my constituents suffer. Yeah. His delay and his denial about this virus from the very beginning, was deadly, cost lives. I mean, there was a study out from Columbia University that had we started the social distancing like a week earlier, 36,000 fewer people would have died. But he was still calling it a hoax. We're now in a situation where we've passed the 100,000 death mark. I mean, and he's still trying to downplay it like it's nothing. It is and we're only in May. We're only in May, right? If you look back at the Spanish flu, the fall was the worst period in terms of deaths. I hope that doesn't happen here.
Me too.
We need to be coordinated, and this is not about anybody's reelection. This is not about how do I look? Do I look good with a mask or not? Who cares how you look, right? I mean, the bottom line is you have to set an example, because when he doesn't set an example, there were people out there that follow him. Those who took hydroxychloroquine, we're now being told, the studies have said it could be deadly, or when he's talking about injecting disinfectant in our bodies. I mean, it's just, so we need to be coordinated here in a way that we're all working together.
Yep, couldn't agree more. And he's done a huge disservice. I think about, his failure to force domestic production of PPE early on. As a result, we've got hospitals competing against each other, now businesses competing, states competing against each other, prices through the roof. Only the suppliers are making out. It's, so many failures along the way. I hope to God he keeps in place Tony Fauci.
I do too.
Holy Cross grad, right?
Holy Cross grad,
how
right?
about
Absolutely.
that? Everything goes through the heart of the Commonwealth. It's really important, and this is deadly serious, and I know we'll continue to act with urgency, and thank God people like you, Congressman, are where you are, leading as you are.
Well, and I'm grateful that you are where you are. Let me just end with this, and I think you will agree with me. I mean, so we have seen some of the best of our country and our Commonwealth during this crisis. I mean, the people who show up and volunteer in our food banks, and who are there at homeless shelters, or who are checking in on their elderly neighbors, helping them get groceries so they don't have to go to the supermarket. And our doctors and our nurses have been unbelievable. I mean, our first responders, our police and our fire departments, and our EMTs have been unbelievable. The people who are handing out meals to our children who can't get meals in schools. I mean, I've just seen such generosity. And some great leadership, amongst our mayors and our city managers and our town administrators. And I mean, there's a lot that that gives me hope in the middle of this crisis. And I really, I'm grateful, to all those who call my office with suggestions like, why don't you do this, and how about suggesting, to the speaker, we do that, or whatever. All this is really important. So I am hopeful, and I really believe that we will get through this, and we can emerge from all of this in a way that we actually, build a new normal that is more just, that is more equitable, and that is more fair to everybody.
I can't improve on that.
All right. Well,
I hope we stay in touch.
We will. Thank you, and be safe.
All right, you too.
All
You
right.
too. Good luck down there, okay?
You
Keep up the
too.
fight. Thank you for
Thanks.
everything.
Bye.
Bye-bye.